you doing, guys? Adam here from Avon Dog Services. We put a post on our Facebook page a few days back, and it was asking whether you wanted to see how we train loose lead walking or how we train trying to teach dogs not to jump up. And probably about 75% of you guys said that you'd like to see us train how to get the dogs not to jump up. So that's what we're going to do. Bobber here is going to be our demo dog. Bobber is about a 15-month-old chocolate cocker spaniel, working cocker as well. So fairly busy, fairly active, fairly excitable, which is going to be good for us today. We're going to split this video down into two sections. The reason is, if we did it all in one go, it's long and it's boring and everybody gets tired of watching stuff. Second reason is that the foundations and the fundamentals to this is actually really important, and if you had everything in one go, there's a risk that you'll skip to the end and not do the basics. And that's actually the most important part. So most of the time we get asked, how do I stop the dog from jumping up? And my reply is actually, what would you rather see? Because that's the bit that we want to try and take you down. Trying to get the dogs to offer a different behaviour is much better than waiting for them to slip up and tell them that they've done it wrong. I don't know any other industry that does it like that either. So when you're learning to drive, you wouldn't just have to take your test on the first day of being in a car. GCSEs at 16, you wouldn't take your test without having any schooling or training or learning before that. You wouldn't be expected to be put in a position where people thought you couldn't handle it. And I don't understand why we think that's okay and acceptable for the dogs. So our job is to try and teach Bobber here that there's a wealth of different options that he can offer to get the reward, and there's one option that he can offer that will not get any reward. So we're going to look at marking, and if you aren't familiar with marking, then we can use we'll look back to our videos that we've done in the past of marking and clicker training or yes markers. We're going to use a yes marker with Bobber to start with. So we're going to look for things like him standing still, sitting down, lying down, and we're also going to look for him just wandering around. Basically anything 4 paws on the floor. The reason why I'm not going to ask him to do something, for 2 reasons. One, there could be a bit of an injury there, which we don't know about. We don't know too much about Bobber without looking too in depth. So if I was to keep asking him to sit, and there's a bit of an injury there with maybe a leg or a hip, and it's uncomfortable for him to sit, yes, he'll do it, but kind of poisons the cue at that point. It kind of teaches him that sitting next to me isn't a good thing. And actually I want him to think that sitting next to me is a great thing. Second reason is that I want it nice and autonomous. I want that to be a volunteered option. I want him to think a little bit more about it, especially if your dog goes running off after people to say hello. At distance, the likelihood is they've switched off to you anyway. They've heard, but they're just not concentrating. So we want this already pre-programmed in the dog's mind that there's a certain level of history of reinforcement around doing a whole host of options. So he's got 4 options to choose from that are going to get a treat or a reward, and he's got one action which is jumping up, which is going to remove all that attention. And for those of you who talk about punishments and stuff like that, yes, we are going to use punishments, but it's how you use them. That's the important bit. So the odds are massively in his favour to do the right action, because he's got 4 choices to do a good option or an option that I'd like to see, and he's got 1 action that will remove the reinforcement, which is the treat. The reason why I'm using treats in the early stages as well is simply because if I fuss over him or smooth over him, that's going to get him really excited and he'll just revert back to jumping up. So our job is in the early stages to keep him nice and calm and really build this pot of reinforcement history of being 4 paws on the ground. Okay, so you may notice a massive continuity issue. When we were working with Bobber, sadly he just wasn't quite comfortable in working with what we were doing. And for most people who say, well, you're a trainer, you should be able to work with them under any circumstances. No. Being a good trainer knows when to stop. So we didn't push him too far, we didn't push him over his threshold, he didn't want to work, we're happy with that, I don't mind. So we've now got Tessa, who is a year-old cockapoo. We're going to work through the same setup, same thing. We're going to start to look at any behaviours that we are happy with, and we're going to reward those. And it could be even something like a stand. Most people go, well, he's always standing. Well, brilliant. If that's better than jumping up, then that's where you put your reinforcement in. So here we go. Yes. So we're just going to start moving around, and as soon as we come to a standstill, look to see what Tessa does. Yes. dog still has the option to jump. If she was to jump up, I would just simply stop, say nothing, take a step back, and that becomes my punishment. Removing that attention is the punishment in itself. We don't need to give anything else from that point. Yes. Ooh, now we're starting to see a nice calm sit. Yes. So remember, we're not asking for these behaviours. Try to let the dog work this out for themselves, because that gives the dog a better understanding as to what to do when you're not around and you're not prompting those behaviours. Yes. Yes, good girl, well done. Okay, step 2. Now we're going to start to add in a little bit of distraction. My distraction is just going to be clap hands or click fingers or move around. Just do something that adds in a little bit more excitement into the setup. We should hopefully find that we've built enough of a reinforcement history for those sits, stands, downs, whatever you choose to mark. And remember, you can mark all of them. You don't have to reward just one single exercise. You can reward all 4 of them if you see them in succession. So we're just going to start to add in a bit of extra distraction now. We're going to hopefully see the same response, still reward where we're happy with. Here we go. Yes. So no jumping up, but she followed, she paid attention, so that's good enough for me. Yes. Yes. So if this distraction gets too much for your dog and the dog jumps, go back 1 step. Just take a step back. Not physically, but in terms of your training. Take that step back to where you calm things down, slow things through, move from there. Hiya. Yes. So Tess is pretty good now. We've done a lot of work off camera, which is good. So she's starting to really respond to what we require when there's added excitement now. Okay, step number 3. We're now going to put in a real life scenario that happens to a lot of people, where you get a well-meaning person of the public who comes over and starts to tap their legs, almost trying to invite the dogs to jump up. And you as an owner say, I'm really sorry, we're trying not to let the dogs jump up. And that person says, oh, it's okay, I don't mind. Oh, that's really frustrating. So we're going to teach the dogs not to jump up at that point, not to see that as an open invitation to jump up, but to retrain that gesture to mean something else. So I'm going to tap my legs, and what I'm hoping for is that Tessa either sits or stands. Now the likelihood is she's more likely to offer the least relaxing behaviour at that point in time, which for us is her probably just moving around. And that's fine by me, because when you increase the level of difficulty when you're training, certainly for me anyway, my level of expectation comes down massively. I don't expect anything near as much with the dog in distraction areas as I do when there's in calmer environments. So if I don't see the sit now, but I see the stand, I'm still happy with that, because she hasn't jumped, even though we've added that extra distraction in. Hope that makes sense. Let's have a look at it. Hiya. Yeah, good girl. Really nice. So she stood the first time, because that added distraction like we were mentioning. She stood the first time. However, second time she kind of went, oh, it's okay, I can sit and I can still get the reward. So just a nice calm exercise. Up. Yes. Good girl. So what we're actually doing is conditioning that gesture to mean do something calm. And people do it all the time with sits. The hand comes up over the dog's head, the dog sits. You do that for wait or stay or whatever you choose. The dogs are very good at reading visual cues. So all we're doing, we're not trying to entice the dogs to jump up. That's the important bit. What we're trying to do is retrain what tapping your legs means. And actually that now means if you stand or sit, you get the treat. Yes, good girl. Nice work. Brilliant. So that's the end of the first stage of the video. We're going to put another one up in a few days' time. So I want you to really work hard on trying to build this pot of reward history or reinforcement history for stand, sit, down, walking around. And remember, when you increase the level of distraction or difficulty, you must reduce the level of expectation that you have on the dog at that point in time.